"You're just dead weight," my son shouted across the kitchen table. "Dad's gone. I'm selling the restaurant. You'll get your share." I smiled and said, "All right, good luck with that." What he didn't know was that every recipe, every brick, and every dollar still had my name on it. His father made sure of that before he died. And when my son tried to erase me, the truth I'd been saving would erase him instead. It was another gray morning in Seattle. The rain was steady, the kind that never really stops, just changes between light and heavy. I came in early to the restaurant, Rhodes Table, to open up and do some cleaning. It's what I do every morning, even after my husband passed. It keeps me busy and makes the place feel alive. I was wiping the counter when my son walked in. He didn't say good morning. He didn't even look around the restaurant. He went straight to the table, opened his laptop, and said, "Mom, the investors are ready. We just need your signature." He looked different now. Expensive suit, polished shoes, hair slicked back. He had that look people get when they start believing they're smarter than everyone else. Before I could answer, he said, "Dad's gone. It's time to move on. This place is outdated." Then he looked right at me and said, "You're a relic, Mom. The world's moved on. Diners want tech, not tenderness." That word stayed in the air for a moment. Relic. Like I was some old object sitting in the way. I didn't say anything. I just kept wiping the counter. When my husband was alive, he used to say silence can tell the truth better than words. I guess I learned that over the years. A minute later, Nate walked in. He's my son's business partner, the one who always talks like he's doing you a favor. He smiled and said, "Evelyn, legacy's great, but it doesn't pay the bills. You should let Michael handle this. Think scalability." I looked at him and then at my son. I said, "Legacy feeds people. Scalability feeds pride." Nate laughed, but my son didn't. He just looked annoyed. I could see he'd already made up his mind. He thought this was going to be easy. He thought I'd just sign the papers and walk away. I thought about when he was a little boy. He used to sit on this same counter, his legs swinging, waiting for the soup to finish cooking. He'd ask 100 questions about everything. I used to tell him, "Taste before you season. You can't cook with numbers, you cook with your heart." He'd nod and laugh. Now, all he talked about was data, sales, and expansion. It hurt, but not in the way you'd think. I wasn't angry. I was disappointed. He didn't understand that Rhodes Table wasn't just a restaurant. It was the life his father and I built together. Every table, every plate, every recipe meant something. I put the rag down and said, "All right, Michael, let's talk about your deal." He smiled. He thought he'd won. "You'll see, Mom," he said. "This is good for everyone." I nodded. "I'm sure it is," I told him. He had no idea. My husband and I had talked about this kind of thing before he passed. He was worried Michael would try to sell the business someday. So we made sure everything was protected legally and properly. But I didn't say that. There was no reason to. They left soon after, talking about meetings and investors, acting like the world was theirs. I watched them go and then went back to wiping the same counter. The rain outside got louder. The restaurant felt quiet, but not empty. More like it was holding its breath. My son thought I was giving up. What he didn't understand was that I was giving him room to make a mistake. Sometimes that's the only way people learn. I looked at the chair where his father used to sit and said quietly, "All right, Sam, the lesson's about to begin." And that was the moment I decided to let my son think he'd already won. When Samuel passed, we closed Rhodes Table for the first time in 27 years. The staff offered to handle things, but I told them to stay home. The restaurant needed silence that day. It had earned it. Seattle was gray, colder than usual. The smell of rain mixed with the smell of the fresh bread Ruth had baked that morning before she left it on the counter. She said it was for Sam, so the place wouldn't feel empty when we walked out the door. At the church, people filled every pew. Regular customers, old employees, vendors who'd been with us since we opened. I recognized faces I hadn't seen in decades. They hugged me, pressed my hands, and told me stories about Sam's jokes, his patience, his stubbornness. Everyone wanted to tell me how much they admired him. Ruth Delgado, our head chef, stood outside near the steps, holding a small bouquet of flowers that had already started to wilt. She didn't try to come in. She just stood there quietly until I went to her. She said, "He always told me to never burn the sauce, even when life gets hard. I'm going to miss hearing him say that." I hugged her. Ruth isn't the kind of person who cries in front of others, but that day she did. Inside, Miles Carver, Sam's best friend and the man who had filmed every milestone we ever had, sat near the back with his camera bag. I didn't expect him to bring it. He leaned in and whispered, "He made me film everything, Evelyn. Said someday truth would need proof." I nodded, not really sure what that meant. I was too tired to think about it. When the service ended, people lined up to give their condolences. Some called me the quiet fire behind the kitchen. It made me smile a little. Sam used to say that himself when he introduced me to new staff. "She's the quiet fire, I'm just the smoke." Chloe showed up halfway through the reception. She wore big black sunglasses and a designer coat that didn't belong at a funeral. She hugged me loosely like she was doing me a favor. Then she asked, "Who handles Dad's shares now?" It was like someone had turned off the sound in the room. I could see Ruth looking over from across the hall, shaking her head slightly. I took a slow breath and said, "We'll talk about that later, sweetheart." Chloe nodded as if that was all she came for. She didn't stay long. Someone said she had an early flight to catch. That night, after everyone left and the house went quiet, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the office at the back of the restaurant, surrounded by paperwork and old photographs. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. On the desk was a key Sam had left taped inside one of his notebooks. He'd written for Evelyn, "When the time feels right." I had ignored it for months, afraid of what it might unlock. That night, I decided to use it. The key opened the small metal cabinet we kept for taxes and old contracts. Inside was a large envelope marked in Sam's handwriting, Project Legacy. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were our marriage certificate, updated legal documents showing that Rhodes Table was registered under joint ownership, and a short handwritten note. It said, "If they ever forget who built the table, remind them who cooked the first meal." That was all. No instructions, no explanations. Just that one line that sounded exactly like him, simple and steady, like a message left for when I'd need strength more than comfort. Behind the papers was a small flash drive. I didn't know what was on it, but I recognized the label, Rhodes Film Archive, M. Carver. Miles's handwriting, maybe it was the proof he'd mentioned. I held it for a long time, turning it over in my hand. I thought about what Sam might have planned, what he might have known about our son that I hadn't wanted to see. Maybe he saw this coming. Sam always thought ahead. I set the flash drive on the desk, but didn't plug it in. I wasn't ready to watch whatever was on it. Some things, once you see them, you can't unsee. The rain outside got heavier. It sounded like it was washing the city clean. I stared at the envelope, the papers, the note, the quiet proof that Sam had still been protecting me even after he was gone. That night I understood something I hadn't before. My husband hadn't left me alone. He had left me instructions. He knew there would come a day when someone, maybe even our own child, would forget how this family was built. And he wanted to make sure I'd have a way to remind them. I closed the cabinet, turned off the lights, and sat for a while in the dark. I could almost hear his voice saying, "Don't rush, Evelyn. Timing is everything." When I finally stood up, I took the flash drive with me and locked the office door behind me. I still didn't know if what was on that drive was evidence or just his last goodbye. But I knew one thing. Whatever it was waiting for the right moment. And that moment was coming sooner than my son could ever imagine. A week after the funeral, my son called a strategy meeting at the restaurant. He said it was about modernization and rebranding. I didn't argue. I showed up, sat in the back corner, and listened. They had cleared out the tables in the dining room to make space for a projector and a few folding chairs. The staff had been told to take the morning off. Only a handful of people were there: Chloe, Nate, a few young marketing consultants, and me. The projector threw bright colors across the wall as Chloe clicked through her slides. At the top of the screen were the words, "Rebranding from cozy to cool." I looked at the pictures they'd chosen. The warm wood tables my husband had built were replaced with metal ones in the mock-ups. The lighting was colder, the walls painted black, and the handwritten chalkboard menu was gone. In its place was a tablet ordering system with personalized dining data. They were turning our restaurant into something that looked like an airport lounge. "This is the direction the market's moving," Nate said, walking back and forth like a motivational speaker. "Customers want experiences, not nostalgia. Our research shows that the Rhodes brand has legacy value, but it needs a fresh identity." He clicked to another slide. It showed our old logo, Rhodes Table written in Sam's handwriting, next to a new one, RHO. Just 3 letters. Cold, corporate, unrecognizable. Chloe was standing beside him, smiling like it was the proudest moment of her life. This will help us reach younger audiences, she said. Dad's generation loved tradition. My generation values innovation. I kept quiet. I didn't trust myself to speak without saying something I'd regret. They went on for almost an hour, talking about influencer partnerships, franchise models, loyalty apps. None of it had anything to do with food or people or the heart that kept the restaurant alive for nearly 3 decades. Finally, Nate turned to me. Evelyn, we'd love your blessing before we finalize this. The lawyers have drafted the temporary management transfer documents. You'll still be a partner, of course. This is just to give us operational freedom. Operational freedom. That's what they were calling it. I looked at the screen one more time, at the sleek new logo, the cold interior, the disappearing memory of what my husband and I built. I thought about his note, the one inside the envelope. If they ever forget who built the table, remind them who cooked the first meal. I didn't remind them. Not yet. Instead, I said, "Oh, all right, let's see the paperwork." Chloe's smile widened. "I knew you'd understand, Mom. This is how we move forward." I could see Ruth watching from the doorway. She had come to drop off some invoices but froze when she saw what was happening. Our eyes met for a second and I gave her a small shake of the head. Not now. Jonas Patel walked in a few minutes. Later. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had been my lawyer for years. But more importantly, he was a former law student of mine from when I used to teach part-time accounting courses at the community college. He had that same cautious look he used to wear before asking a tough question in class. He leaned close and whispered, "Mrs. Rhodes, are you sure you want to sign over temporary management control?" I could tell he was uncomfortable even asking. He looked at me like someone who already knew the answer but hoped he was wrong. I said quietly, "Jonas, I don't believe in persuasion. I believe in consequences." He blinked. Then he smiled slightly, not out of happiness but out of understanding. "All right," he said. "Then I'll make sure the documents reflect that you're protected." Nate clapped his hands together. "Perfect. Let's get this done. We've got an investor dinner in 2 weeks. Big opportunities." As they passed the papers around, I noticed how my son's signature looked nothing like his father's. Sam's handwriting had always been steady and honest. Michael's was sharp, rushed, and careless. I signed my name slowly, every letter neat and clear. Nate glanced over my shoulder and said, "That's it. Congratulations. You won't regret this." I smiled politely. "Oh, I don't think I will." After the meeting ended, they all left to celebrate at a nearby hotel bar. I stayed behind. The projector was still humming, casting blue light across the empty room. The slide on the wall said, "The future starts now." I sat there for a while, listening to the hum. Then I turned off the projector and the restaurant went dark again. Jonas came back in, holding his briefcase. "You're not really giving up control, are you?" he asked quietly. I looked at him and said, "No, Jonas, I'm just giving them enough rope." He nodded slowly. "They don't see it, but you're planning something." "I'm not planning anything," I said. "I'm waiting. That's different." He smiled again, the kind of smile people make when they realize they're watching something they'll tell stories about later. "You always did believe in timing," he said. I gathered the papers, put them neatly in a folder, and locked them in the drawer behind the counter. As Jonas walked out, he said over his shoulder, "If you need me when the storm hits, I'll be ready." I looked out the window. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy and low, like it was holding something back. "They think I've gotten weak," I said quietly to the empty restaurant. "But really, I'm just keeping rhythm for the storm." It didn't take long for the changes to start. Within a week of signing the papers, Chloe called the first creative meeting. She walked into the restaurant with a young marketing team and a menu printed on glossy paper. It looked like something out of a tech startup, not a kitchen. "Starting next month," she said, "we'll introduce fusion brunch weekends, a vegan molecular stew, and a smart menu with QR codes and AI-based recommendations. It'll be modern, exciting, and Instagram-ready." The staff looked around the room, confused. Ruth was standing near the stove, arms crossed, flour still on her apron. "Fusion brunch?" she repeated. "What's that supposed to be?" Chloe smiled like she was talking to a child. "It's about creating experiences, Ruth. We can't just serve food anymore. People want novelty, not comfort." Ruth wiped her hands and took a deep breath. "People come here because they trust us. They come for what we already do best. We don't need to break what works just to sound trendy." Nate, who was standing beside Chloe, said, "Trends are the future, Ruth. You either evolve or you fade." Ruth looked straight at him. Food isn't evolution, it's memory. You two wouldn't understand that. The room went quiet. Chloe's expression hardened. This attitude is exactly what's holding us back, she said. You've been here too long, Ruth. Maybe it's time for a new direction. Ruth didn't move. Your father trusted me to keep this kitchen honest. That's all I've ever done. Chloe crossed her arms. Then consider this your final day keeping it honest. It was like someone had dropped a plate on the floor. Nobody said a word. Even Nate looked unsure for a moment. Ruth nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting it. All right, she said quietly. If that's how it is. She untied her apron and hung it on the same hook she'd used for 30 years. The knot was tight, but her hands didn't shake. Then she looked at me. Mrs. Rhodes, she said, well, I'm sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for, I told her. You kept this place alive. She smiled sadly. He'd be proud of you, you know. Sam always said you had more patience than he did. I followed her to the door. She stopped in the doorway, looking around one last time. The shelves, the stoves, the pictures of old staff parties on the wall. The kitchen feels different already, she said. Sometimes, I told her quietly, the fire has to go out before the ashes can speak. She gave me a long look, nodded, and walked into the rain. I watched until she disappeared down the street. When I came back inside, Chloe was pacing by the counter. You shouldn't have said that, she told me. You made me look bad. You didn't need my help for that, I said calmly. She rolled her eyes. You're so dramatic. Ruth was loyal, but she's outdated. The restaurant needs energy, fresh ideas. Fresh ideas don't replace good values, I said. You can't innovate trust? Chloe sighed like she was tired of me. Mom, this isn't about values, it's business. I know, I said. That's what scares me. She walked off toward her office, heels clicking hard on the tile floor. Nate followed, already talking about influencers and launch dates. The kitchen felt too quiet after that. I stood there for a while, staring at Ruth's apron still hanging on the wall. It was the same beige cotton one she wore her first day here, the one Sam had given her when we couldn't afford proper uniforms. She kept it spotless all these years. I reached out and touched it. The fabric was still warm. I don't know why that detail hit me so hard, but it did. Outside, I could hear the rain again. It sounded like it did the day of Sam's funeral. Soft, constant, impossible to ignore. The new staff started coming in a few days later, younger faces who spoke more about social media than ingredients. They looked nervous around me, unsure whether to call me Mrs. Rhodes or Evelyn. I didn't correct them either way. I wasn't sure what I was anymore, owner, widow, mother, or just a woman watching her life's work being redesigned into something she couldn't recognize. Every night I stayed late, cleaning the counters the way Ruth used to. It wasn't about cleanliness anymore. It was about remembering how the kitchen was supposed to feel. Warm, honest, alive. But each evening, when I turned off the lights, it felt emptier. The sound of the refrigerator filled the silence like a slow heartbeat, faint and fading. The first week after Ruth left, the kitchen's main light bulb burned out over the stove. I never replaced it. I told myself I'd do it tomorrow, then the next day, and then I stopped thinking about it altogether. When I finally locked up one night, I looked back through the glass door. The room was dark except for the small light by the exit sign. For the first time since Sam and I opened Rhodes' table, the kitchen didn't look alive. The fire was gone, and the only thing left was the quiet sound of rain. That was the night I realized the restaurant wasn't just losing its warmth, it was losing its heart. And hearts, once they go cold, don't come back easily. It was a Friday morning when the corporate cars started showing up outside the restaurant. 3 black SUVs, identical, polished so clean they looked like mirrors. The kind of cars that carry people who don't know how to cook but know how to buy what other people build. The name on the visitor list said Eat Right Global. I'd heard of them. Big health food corporation that bought family restaurants, stripped them of everything human, and sold them as lifestyle brands. Their CEO was young, mid-30s, gray hair that looked expensive, like he'd paid someone to make him look wise. He shook Chloe's hand in front of a dozen cameras. This is Legacy 2.0, baby, Nate said with a grin, his arm around my son's shoulder like they'd just won something. Inside, the flashbulbs popped one after another. Reporters asked questions about the modernization of a historic brand. Chloe smiled for every camera. She'd learned how to smile without meaning it. They set up a signing table in my husband's old office, the same desk where Sam once taught her how to balance books. Now it was covered in microphones and sponsor mugs. Chloe leaned forward, pen in hand, as photographers shouted her name. She looked proud, confident, completely blind. When the cameras went off, I went back to the kitchen. It was empty now, quieter than it had ever been. The air smelled different since Ruth left, like cleaning solution instead of butter and herbs. I picked up a spoon from the rack and started polishing it, one at a time, slowly. When Sam was alive, he used to say, "Customers don't remember what they ate. They remember how steady the hands were that made it." He believed that if your hands didn't shake, your heart wouldn't either. I stood there holding that spoon and realized my hands weren't shaking. Not at all. I wasn't angry anymore. I was waiting. The door creaked open behind me. It was Jonas. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from watching people make bad decisions you can't stop. "They're signing the full agreement tomorrow morning," he said. "You still have time to pull out, Evelyn. I can file a motion and freeze the transfer until a review hearing." I shook my head. "No," I said, "let them sign." He frowned. "You don't want to stop them?" "I don't stop fires, Jonas," I said. "I let them burn long enough to make the lesson stick." He stared at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "You're not afraid of losing the company." "I already lost it once," I said. "When Sam died. Everything after that is just paperwork." Jonas nodded slowly. "Then I'll make sure the paperwork is solid, for when the ashes settle." He left without another word. The kitchen went quiet again. That night, while Chloe and Nate were out celebrating with the investors, I stayed at the restaurant. I turned off every light except the one above the sink. The single bulb flickered slightly. I sat at the table near the window, the same table Sam and I used to eat dinner after closing time. I poured myself a cup of tea, no sugar, and just listened to the rain. Across town, in some high-end hotel, my son was probably toasting to a new era with people who couldn't pronounce our last name right. I didn't need to be there to imagine it. At that same time, Ruth was sitting in her small apartment above the grocery store. She still kept her chef's knives in a wooden box, though she hadn't touched them since the day she left. The news was playing softly on her TV, a preview of the Rhodes Table rebranding event scheduled for Monday. She stared at the screen. Her old kitchen, my kitchen, filled the frame as reporters talked about innovation and change. The camera cut to a shot of Chloe smiling beside the Eat Right CEO. Ruth sighed and turned off the sound. The oven light glowed faintly behind her, washing her face in gold. She didn't cry, but her eyes stayed fixed on the empty counter, like she could still see the ghost of a pot simmering there. Meanwhile, Chloe was at a rooftop dinner with Nate and the Eat Right executives. There was champagne, city lights, and talk about scaling, equity options, and expansion plans. Every few minutes, she'd glance at her phone, checking likes on the company's social media post about the partnership. "This is the start of something big," the CEO said. "You've built something people trust. Now we'll make them pay for it." Chloe laughed, raising her glass. "To legacy reimagined." Nate leaned in and whispered, "Your mom's going to thank us someday." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Somewhere in the back of her mind, maybe she knew what she was losing, but she pushed it away with another sip of champagne. At home, I opened the old filing cabinet and took out the envelope Sam had left, Project Legacy. The flash drive was still inside, untouched. I turned it over in my hand again and said out loud, "Not yet." Then I called Miles. He answered on the first ring. "Evelyn," he said, voice rough with age and cigarettes. "You're finally ready?" "Almost," I told him. "How soon can you come by?" "I can be there in an hour," he said. "But tell me first, are we talking preservation or revelation?" "Revelation," I said. "It's time they see what Sam saw coming." There was a long pause. Then Miles said softly, "He always said you'd know when." "I do now," I said. He laughed quietly. "Then I'll bring the hard drives. Sam's voice deserves to be heard one more time." While we spoke, he was already digging through his old boxes, dusty reels, backup discs, drives labeled by year. When he found the one marked Rhodes Table, Founders, he stopped. He held it up to the desk lamp. The label had faded, but the blue light from the drive reflected in his glasses. He whispered almost to himself, "Sam, maybe it's time." The next morning, the Eat Right signing event made the local news. Chloe and Nate stood on stage beside the CEO, cameras flashing all around. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. I was in the kitchen again, polishing silverware, the same way I always do when I'm waiting for something to end. They thought they were securing their future. I knew they were setting fire to their past. And sometimes that's the only way people learn what things are really worth. The night before the signing, the restaurant was dark. Only the small office light was on, the same one Samuel had used for late-night bookkeeping. It flickered a little, probably from age, but it made the room feel alive, like he was still there, sitting across from me with that patient look he always had. I sat at his desk, the one with scratches from years of coffee cups and paperwork, and stared at the flash drive Miles had given me. It looked harmless, a small black stick of plastic and metal, but I could feel the weight of what it carried. For weeks I told myself I wasn't ready to see what was on it. But that night, with the contract signing only hours away, I finally was. I took a deep breath, plugged it into Sam's old computer, and waited. The screen blinked. A folder appeared. Rhodes Table Archive, 1998-2019. Inside were dozens of video files, each marked with the date. The most recent one was labeled Legacy Message. My hand shook as I clicked it. For a few seconds, the screen stayed black. Then, static. And then, Sam. He was sitting in the kitchen, wearing his old white chef's coat. The lighting was bad, the sound rough, but his face was clear. Older, tired, but still smiling that soft, steady smile that made everyone around him calm. "Evelyn," he said, looking straight at the camera, "if you're watching this, I guess I didn't make it as far as I hoped." He laughed a little, that same half-chuckle he used to make when the oven timer went off. "I asked Miles to record this," he continued, "because I know how people can change when money starts talking louder than love. You and I built Rhodes Table together, Evie. Every recipe, every customer, every brick. You handled the books, the staff, the complaints, the vendors, all the things I was too stubborn to deal with. This place only worked because you kept it working." He looked down, then back up again. "People see my name on the door and assume it's my restaurant, but you were the one who made it real. Without you, Rhodes Table would just be plates and bills." I felt my throat tighten. I hadn't heard his voice in so long. Hearing it now, calm, kind, familiar, felt like being hit with both love and loss at the same time. The video cut to a montage, scenes from our early years. Miles must have filmed them all. Sam in the kitchen teaching Ruth how to sear steak without burning it. Me in the office arguing with him about whether we could afford new ovens that year. The two of us laughing when the first batch of bread burned and filled the restaurant with smoke. For a few minutes, I forgot why I was watching. I just sat there, smiling through tears, letting the memories play like they were happening again. Then the video shifted. The background was darker now. Same kitchen, but empty. Sam was sitting alone at the counter, elbows on the table, voice lower. "If one day greed knocks on the door," he said quietly, "show them this tape." He looked straight into the lens, eyes steady. "Because anyone who tries to take what we built without understanding it doesn't deserve it." The video ended. The screen went black. The only sound was the faint hum of the computer fan. I sat there for a long time. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe for a few seconds. I thought I'd cry because of the betrayal happening around me. The company, the sale, the loss of everything Sam and I had built. But that wasn't it. I cried because seeing him again reminded me that love can survive everything, even death, if you leave behind the truth. And Sam had left it. In his words, in his planning, in that video. When I finally wiped my eyes, I looked at the flash drive again. That little piece of plastic was no longer just evidence. It was his voice, his warning, his love letter. I opened my phone and called Ruth. She answered after the first ring. "Mrs. Rhodes?" Her voice was cautious, like she thought I might still be angry. "Ruth," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "Tomorrow, put your apron back on." There was silence. Then she said softly, "You're serious?" "Yes," I said, "and bring Miles with you." She took a breath. "You're really doing this?" "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I'm just keeping a promise." When I hung up, I looked around the office. Everything was still, the shelves lined with recipe books, the framed photos of Sam and me from the restaurant's opening day, the old wall clock ticking like it had been waiting for this moment. I stood up, unplugged the flash drive, and set it beside Sam's old chef's hat. Then I walked to the storage room and found Miles's old camera, the one he used for our anniversary documentary. It was dusty, but when I pressed the power button, the small light flicked on. I plugged it into the charger. The battery made a soft click as it locked in place. The The sound was small, but it felt like something waking up, like a heartbeat starting again after years of silence. I sat back down and waited. Tomorrow morning my son would stand in front of cameras again, trying to sell the soul of this place, and for the first time I wouldn't be silent. I wasn't planning revenge, I was planning the truth, and the truth was about to go public. The Regent Hotel downtown had never looked so polished. The marble floors gleamed like glass, and every chandelier seemed to compete for attention. Reporters were already crowding the ballroom, holding cameras and microphones waiting for the big announcement, the partnership between Rhodes Table and Eat Right Global. It was the kind of event that looked more like a wedding than a business deal. I guess in a way it was a wedding between greed and ignorance. I arrived quietly, walking past the reporters and assistants who didn't recognize me. My name wasn't on the list, but Jonas had arranged everything. I sat in the very last row, near the exit, where the cameras wouldn't catch me. At the front of the room, a massive LED screen displayed the future of Rhodes Table. Beneath it stood Chloe in a sleek white dress that screamed success. Nate was beside her, adjusting his cufflinks, smiling for every lens pointed his way. I looked at my son. He was everything the world told him to be. Confident, ambitious, well-dressed. And yet, I'd never seen him look smaller. Jonas and Ruth were in the control booth at the back of the ballroom. Miles sat between them, laptop open, cables running from his bag to the hotel's LED system. He wore his old leather jacket, the same one he'd had since the 90s. His hands shook slightly, but his eyes were sharp. The press conference started on time. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, "thank you for joining us today as we celebrate the rebirth of an iconic brand." Applause filled the room. Chloe stepped up to the podium, smiling brightly, soaking it in. "Thank you," she began. "For over 30 years, Rhodes Table has represented tradition, comfort, and community. But as times change, so must we. Today we take the next step, evolving beyond old sentimentalism to embrace a bold, modern vision." The words hit exactly as I knew they would. Evolving beyond old sentimentalism. That was her line. The one she had practiced in front of the mirror, the one she'd built her entire speech around. She continued, "With Eat Right Global, we are turning legacy into innovation. This partnership..." The lights flickered. At first, nobody noticed. Just a brief dimming, then back to normal. Chloe hesitated, glancing up at the ceiling, but kept going. "This partnership will bring our story to a new generation of customers who value..." The lights flickered again. This time, longer. Murmurs rippled through the room. Up in the control booth, Jonas gave Miles a small nod. Miles exhaled, tapped a few keys, and pressed enter. The giant LED screen behind Chloe glitched for half a second. The Rhodes Table logo blurred, distorted, and then vanished. A grainy video appeared. It was Samuel. Sitting in our old kitchen, wearing his white chef's coat. The same video I had watched the night before. The room went completely silent. Sam's voice filled the ballroom, low and steady. "Rhodes Table was never mine alone," he said. "It belonged to Evelyn. Without her recipes, her patience, and her care, this place would just be plates and bills." Every camera turned toward the screen. Chloe froze, hand gripping the podium. Nate looked confused. The video continued, clips of Sam and me in the kitchen, laughing, arguing playfully, working side by side. The footage shifted to staff celebrations, Ruth cooking in the back, customers smiling. It was raw and real, nothing like the polished presentation they'd planned. And then, Sam's voice again. "If one day greed knocks on the door, show them this tape." The audience gasped. Reporters started whispering to each other. Phones came out. Someone in the front row was already live streaming it. Chloe turned, trying to signal the technician to stop it. But the technician wasn't in control. Miles was. I could see her panic spreading. Her posture stiffened, her breathing quickened. Nate stepped forward, whispering, "Kill the feed." But the video kept playing. Jonas was standing near the exit, arms crossed. He wasn't smiling, but I could tell he wanted to. On screen, Sam's face filled the frame one last time. "Evelyn," he said softly, "if they forget who built the table, remind them who cooked the first meal." Then the screen went black. For a moment, nobody moved. The silence was so heavy you could hear the buzz of the lights above, and then, all at once, questions started flying. Is that real footage? Did her husband record this? Is the company still being sold? Chloe tried to talk over them. "That video is old," she said, forcing a smile. It was taken out of context. My father, he loved innovation. But her voice cracked. The words stumbled out. She looked around for Nate, but he had already stepped back, distancing himself from her. I stood up from the back row. People turned to look, recognizing me from the video. I didn't raise my voice, but somehow it carried. My husband didn't record lies, I said. Every head turned. Chloe's eyes found me. I could see fear in them. Not the fear of losing money, but the fear of being seen for who she'd become. She tried to compose herself. "Mom," she said, trying to sound calm, "what did you do?" "I just pressed play," I said. She stood there, frozen, the microphone still in her hand, the lights reflecting off her pale face. The cameras captured every second, the tremble in her voice, the confusion on Nate's face, the pride in mine. Security didn't move. The audience didn't either. No one knew what to do. Behind her, the LED screen lit up again, showing one last image, a still frame of Sam and me standing together in front of the restaurant, smiling. The words, "Rhodes Table, Family Owned," appeared in white text. That was Miles's doing, a small touch, but a powerful one. The crowd started clapping, slowly at first, then louder. It wasn't for Chloe. It wasn't for the investors. It was for the truth. Chloe lowered the microphone. She tried to smile again, but her lip was trembling. Nate whispered something in her ear, probably about damage control. She didn't answer. I turned and walked toward the exit. Jonas opened the door for me, holding it just long enough for me to step through. As the applause continued behind me, I heard the hotel's main lights flicker one last time. Miles met me in the hallway, carrying his laptop and the old camera. "It's done," he said quietly. "Good," I said. "Now let the truth breathe." He smiled, exhausted but proud. "Sam would have loved this." I nodded. He always did enjoy a good show. And for the first time in years, I walked out of a room without looking back. The people inside had just learned what my husband always knew. You can't sell a soul that never belonged to you in the first place. The ballroom was still buzzing when the second video began to play. No one expected it. Not even Jonas. 1 minute, the LED screen was frozen on the last image of Sam and me smiling in front of Rhodes' table. The next, it flickered and a new video faded in. Sam again, same kitchen, same stool, same warm light from the old hanging lamp we'd bought at a flea market 20 years ago. His voice came through steady and strong. "My wife built this place when I was too afraid to fail." The room went dead silent. He looked older in this clip, thinner, tired, but his eyes were bright. The kind of brightness that comes from finally telling the truth. "I used to think this restaurant was my legacy," he said, "but Evelyn was the one who made it home. I had the recipes, sure, but she had the courage. When the bank said no, she mortgaged her wedding ring. When I said we couldn't make payroll, she stayed up all night reworking the numbers until we could." The sound of cameras clicking slowed. Reporters lowered their microphones. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning, even the quiet breathing of people who suddenly realized they were witnessing something raw and human, something no brand consultant could spin. Sam smiled faintly. "If you ever forget what this place stands for, remember this. It was built on love, not leverage, and love doesn't get sold." Then the video faded out, leaving only his voice echoing through the speakers. "Take care of her, take care of each other." When the screen went black again, no one spoke for several seconds. Then someone in the crowd, maybe a journalist, walked on, whispered, "Oh my God." A man from the second row stood and asked, "Mrs. Rhodes, is that true?" All the eyes in the room turned toward me. I hadn't planned to speak. I'd told myself I'd stay in the back, let the video do the talking. But hearing Sam's voice again, that steady kindness, that belief, pulled me to my feet before I even realized it. I walked down the aisle slowly, every step echoing off the marble floor. When I reached the stage, Chloe was still frozen in place, pale and trembling. Her microphone was dangling from her hand. Nate stood stiff beside her, trying to figure out what damage control meant in a moment like this. I took the microphone gently from my son's hand. "Rhodes Table," I said, "was never just my husband's dream. It was our kitchen, our life, our story." I looked out at the cameras, the lights, the people who thought they were watching a business event but were really witnessing a confession. "And stories," I said, "aren't for sale." For a second, no one moved. Then the room erupted. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and phones went up to capture every word. Chloe took a step back, shaking her head like she could somehow undo what just happened. Her heel caught the edge of the stage and she stumbled. The microphone slipped. from her hand and clattered to the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silence that followed. "Mom, what did you do?" she whispered. I didn't answer. Some questions answer themselves. Behind her, Nate lunged toward the control booth, trying to pull the plug on the sound system, but 2 security guards blocked his way. One of them said calmly, "My management wants the feed to keep running." He froze. Even Eat Right's own staff weren't going to touch this. The live stream didn't cut out. If anything, it picked up speed. Comments were flooding in. Phones were buzzing all over the ballroom. Mama Rhodes, The Real Rhodes, Table, Love Over Legacy. The hashtag spread faster than the PR team could react. Within minutes, thousands of viewers were watching the clip online. The internet had already chosen its side. I turned back to the crowd. My hands were steady, my voice even stronger now. "You can redesign a logo," I said, "but you can't rebrand truth. My husband gave the city a place to belong, and no corporation gets to decide that belonging is outdated." I looked down at Chloe. She was crying now. Quiet, desperate tears that had nothing to do with regret and everything to do with humiliation. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her, only sadness. "Someday," I said softly, "you'll understand why I did this. I hope it won't be too late to find your own table again." The cameras flashed nonstop. Every photo captured the same image: an older woman standing under the ballroom lights, calm, dignified, unshaken, surrounded by chaos, but completely at peace. Behind me, the large LED screen turned back on one last time. This time, no one had programmed it. Miles was running the feed manually from the booth. It showed a simple image: the original Rhodes table sign, hand-painted and slightly crooked, glowing in the dim light of our first night open. Underneath, in white letters, "Built on love, served with truth." Applause broke out, not the kind people give out of politeness, but the kind that comes from their chest, from something real. Even the journalists joined in. Some were crying. Others were recording, whispering to each other that this was the kind of story that didn't happen anymore, the kind that reminded people why they started caring in the first place. I stepped down from the stage. Ruth met me halfway, her apron folded neatly over her arm. She handed it to me and said, "I believe this belongs to you again." I smiled, took it, and said, "No, Ruth, it belongs to all of us." As we walked out together, the ballroom lights flashed like stars, bright, relentless, blinding, but not cold anymore. They were warm, they were ours. And for the first time since Sam died, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. By the next morning, the video had gone everywhere. News anchors called it "the mother who outsmarted greed." Every major network replayed the moment: Samuel's voice, Chloe's stunned face, and me standing under the ballroom lights. Clips from the conference flooded social media. Talk shows debated whether it was the greatest live moral lesson ever caught on camera. Hashtags like Jar Mama Rhodes and Nugal Love Over Legacy trended for days. People who'd never eaten at Rhodes' table before started showing up just to take pictures in front of the sign. Some brought flowers, some brought their kids. A few even brought old menus they'd saved from years ago. When I came in that Monday, the line stretched down the block. The smell of coffee and butter filled the air again, the kind of smell that used to mean everything was okay. Ruth was already there wearing her apron. The staff gathered around her, cheering when she tied it back on. Someone started clapping, and soon everyone joined in. "Welcome home," I told her. She laughed. "Feels like the kitchen can breathe again." It did. Every surface seemed warmer, brighter. Even the old stove, the one that barely worked anymore, seemed to hum louder, like it knew the heart of the restaurant had come back. Jonas stopped by that afternoon, paperwork in hand. He had a tired smile on his face, the kind lawyers get when justice actually works for once. "You could sue them, you know," he said. "Eat Right, Nate, the PR team. You've got grounds for damages: a defamation, breach of trust, emotional distress. A jury would side with you in a heartbeat." I poured him a cup of coffee and shook my head. "No lawsuits," I said. He frowned. "You sure? You could make an example out of them?" I smiled a little. "Jonas, sometimes the best lesson isn't in punishment. It's in exposure. Letting the world see the truth is enough. Shame does the rest." He looked at me for a long second, then chuckled. "You really don't need me anymore, do you?" Oh, I'll always need a good lawyer, I said. Just not for revenge. That evening, after the crowd died down and the last table was cleared, I found myself back in the kitchen alone. The rain outside had started again, light, steady, familiar. I was stirring soup when I heard the front door open. Footsteps, hesitant ones. It was Chloe. She looked smaller than I remembered. No makeup, no heels, just a plain gray sweater. For the first time in years, she looked like my child again, not a woman trying to prove something. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. "Hi, sweetheart." She sat down at the counter, hands folded, eyes down. The silence between us was heavy, but not angry, just full of things that needed time. I ladled soup into a bowl and set it in front of her. The smell filled the room, carrots, garlic, a little thyme, the same soup I used to make when she was little and sick. "You're not hungry?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, I'm not hungry." She paused. "I just feel empty." I nodded slowly, letting her words hang there. Then I slid the bowl closer to her. "Eat," I said gently. "Start from here." She looked up at me, eyes red but steady. For a moment I saw a flicker of the girl she used to be, the one who used to stand on a stool beside me, stirring pots, laughing at how much salt she accidentally poured in. She picked up the spoon. Her hands were trembling. The first sip made her cry. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, stirring my own pot, giving her space to let the tears fall. Outside, the city lights blurred through the rain. Somewhere, people were still talking about Mama Rhodes, still sharing the video, still writing think pieces about integrity and love. But inside that small kitchen, it wasn't about any of that. It was just me and my child, a bowl of soup, and the slow, quiet work of forgiveness. Because rebuilding doesn't start with a speech or a headline. It starts with a spoonful of warmth after a long stretch of cold. A week after the chaos, things began to settle. The headlines slowed down, the cameras disappeared, and the restaurant returned to its rhythm. The smell of soup simmering, the hum of conversation, the clatter of spoons. Jonas came by with a folder under his arm. He was smiling again, but this time it wasn't the tight, professional smile of a lawyer. It was relief. "All right," he said, setting the folder on the table. "Project Legacy is now officially active. The paperwork's clean. Rhodes Table belongs solely to you. The recordings, the footage, the co-ownership documents, all filed, protected, and legally recognized. Nobody can touch it again." I nodded. Sam would have liked that. Jonas chuckled. He'd have called it poetic justice. Before I could answer, Chloe stepped out from the kitchen. She had been helping Ruth prep vegetables, her hair tied back, her sleeves rolled up. Her hands were red from washing produce, not from manicures. She looked nervous. "Mom, can I talk to you for a minute?" Jonas took the hint and started gathering his things. "I'll give you two a minute," he said. Chloe sat down across from me, wringing her hands. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," she said. "Not because everyone saw what happened, but because I finally did." I didn't interrupt. She took a shaky breath and went on. "I thought I was saving the restaurant by making it bigger. I thought that's what Dad would have wanted. But I didn't see what it already was, that it didn't need saving. It just needed someone who cared." Her voice broke a little. "If you'll let me, I want to start over. No title, no meetings, no deals. Just work from scratch." Jonas had paused near the door, listening. He turned back, eyebrows raised. "You're letting her back in?" I smiled faintly. "Jonas," I said, "you handle the law. I'll handle the heart." He frowned slightly. "You're not asking for compensation? For what she and Nate tried to pull?" I shook my head. If justice needs someone destroyed to feel complete, it's not justice anymore. It's vengeance. And I've had enough of that. Jonas looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That's not something they teach in law school." I smiled. "That's why lawyers need mothers, too." Ruth came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She had heard most of it. She looked at Chloe, not with judgment, but with something softer. "There are dishes," she said quietly, "that can only be cooked with kindness." Chloe nodded, her eyes wet again. "I think I'm ready to learn." "Good," I said, standing. "Then you can start tomorrow." She looked surprised. "Tomorrow?" "Yes," I said. "Every new chapter starts with clean hands. You'll work in the kitchen with Ruth." You'll learn how the knives feel, how the pans sound, how the smells change when the sauce is just right. You'll start small. Doing what? She asked. Washing dishes, I said simply. She blinked, then gave a small, broken laugh. That's fair. I put a hand on her shoulder. Just make sure, when you wash, you don't scrub away what matters. She frowned slightly. What do you mean? I smiled. Don't wash away the memories. The good ones, the bad ones, they're what flavor the work. You forget those and you're just rinsing metal. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of the kitchen carried through the doorway, Ruth humming softly, the faint bubbling of soup, the familiar rhythm of knives on the cutting board. Jonas cleared his throat. Well, Mrs. Rhodes, I think my work here is officially done. Not quite, I said. You still owe me dinner. You promised Sam years ago you'd try my stew and never did. He laughed. Then I'll take that as my next case. As he left, Ruth called from the kitchen, Soup's ready. I gestured toward the counter. Go on, Chloe, serve yourself. She hesitated, then ladled some into a bowl and sat back down. The steam rose between us, curling like a quiet truce. For the first time in a long time, she didn't look lost, just tired, human, and willing. I sat across from her, watching her take the first sip. Her shoulders relaxed. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not fully. But it was a start. And like Sam used to say, every good meal starts slow. The weeks that followed felt like a second beginning, not just for Rhodes' table, but for all of us. Every morning, Chloe came in early, tying her hair back and putting on the plain cotton apron Ruth gave her. She started where every cook starts, at the sink. She washed dishes, wiped counters, and carried trays from the prep line to the dining room. Her manicured hands, once used to typing on laptops, now smelled like onions and soap. The first few days were hard to watch. The girl who once ran marketing meetings was now scrubbing pots while Ruth barked instructions like a drill sergeant. Faster, Ruth would say, but careful. Clean doesn't mean rushed. Chloe would nod, trying not to flinch. Sometimes customers noticed her. One afternoon, an older man who'd been eating here since Sam's time stopped by the pass window. He squinted, then smiled. You're the girl from the video, aren't you? He said. The one who tried to sell this place? Chloe froze, unsure what to say. He chuckled softly. I didn't like you much back then. But I'll tell you something. It takes guts to come back here and face it. That's worth something. He patted the counter and walked away before she could answer. Later that day, Ruth handed Chloe a knife and a pile of carrots. All right, she said. Let's see if you can handle these without cutting off your fingers. Chloe looked nervous. You really trust me with this? Ruth grinned. I trust you to learn. Hold it like this. She adjusted Chloe's grip, her voice steady and firm. Don't be afraid of cuts. A knife's only dangerous to liars. If your hands are honest, it listens. It was a strange lesson, but Chloe nodded. She started chopping slowly, uneven at first, then steadier. Of course, she made mistakes. She broke a bowl one morning. Another day, hot oil splattered onto her wrist, leaving a small burn. She winced, trying to hide it, but I saw. Come here, I told her. I cleaned the burn, wrapped it in gauze, and said softly, mistakes sting, but at least this one comes from trying. Pain isn't failure, sweetheart. It's proof you're learning how to cook again. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes full of something I hadn't seen in years. Humility. Maybe even gratitude. Meanwhile, Jonas and Miles had been busy setting up the Rhodes Legacy Fund, a scholarship for young chefs and hospitality students who wanted to learn traditional cooking with integrity. It's Sam's idea, Miles said. He always said the best recipe was passing on what you know. Jonas grinned. We'll make sure that legacy feeds more than just customers. At night, when the restaurant closed, Chloe stayed behind to practice. Ruth would sit in the corner, sipping tea, correcting her posture, her timing, her seasoning. Sometimes, when Chloe got it right, Ruth would nod and simply say, better. That one word meant more to Chloe than any compliment from a boardroom ever had. One evening, long after closing, Chloe was still at the stove. The smell of simmering soup filled the kitchen. Rich, savory, familiar, I walked in quietly. She didn't notice me at first. She was focused, tasting, adjusting, tasting again. When she finally turned around, she said, I think I got it, Mom. The soup from when I was little. I took a spoon and tasted it. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just let the flavor sit. The balance, the warmth, the patience. Then I smiled. Now you understand why the flame has to stay low. Chloe laughed softly, a tear sliding down her cheek. Yeah, she whispered, because rushing ruins the taste. I nodded. And life's no different. She stood there holding the ladle, eyes shining. I thought cooking was about recipes, she said. But it's really about memory, isn't it? It's about both, I said. Recipes fade if you don't remember why they matter. For the first time, she didn't cry from guilt or regret. She cried because she was proud. Of the soup, of herself, of the chance to start again. Ruth clapped softly from the doorway. Looks like we finally got our kitchen back. We all laughed. The air felt lighter. That night, as I turned off the lights, I looked around the kitchen. The same walls, the same stove, the same sign above the door. It didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like home again. And in that quiet, with the smell of soup still lingering in the air, I thought of Sam. His voice, his laughter, his belief that love could be served one bowl at a time. He was right. Because sometimes the biggest lessons aren't written in contracts or spoken on stages. They're learned in kitchens, through burns, through patience, through the slow, steady work of keeping the flame alive. A year later, Rhodes' table was busier than it had ever been. The lines stretched around the block on weekends. The smell of fresh bread drifted down the street, drawing people in before they even saw the sign. The city had changed, but somehow our little restaurant had found its way back into everyone's hearts. One meal at a time. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with life. The clang of pots, the sound of laughter, the rhythm of work. All of it felt alive again. And right in the middle of it stood Chloe. She'd come a long way from the woman who once stood behind podiums and PowerPoint slides. Now she wore the same beige apron Ruth had once worn, the same one she'd sworn she'd never touch. That morning, she was presenting her first original dish. Comfort Revival Soup, she called it. A mix of her father's old beef stew and my vegetable broth, slow-cooked, patient, with a few new spices of her own. Ruth tasted the final batch before service, smirked, and said, "Not bad, kid. You didn't ruin it." Chloe laughed. "That's high praise from you." "Don't push it," Ruth said, smiling as she turned back to the stove. By noon, the restaurant was packed. Journalists, food bloggers, and loyal customers had all come to see what the Rhodes Table Revival was about. Cameras were set up in the corner. The air was thick with steam and anticipation. A reporter with a small camera approached Chloe near the counter. "You've rebuilt quite a story here," he said. "What's different about the new Rhodes Table?" Chloe smiled, nervous but steady. "Everything and nothing," she said. "We changed the decor, sure, added new dishes, but the heart stayed the same. The lesson, too." He tilted his head. "And what's that lesson?" Chloe looked down for a moment, then back up at him. Her voice softened. "I once called my mother a relic," she said. "Now I know she was the recipe." The reporter paused, surprised by how simple and perfect the line was. Then he smiled. "That's going to be your headline, you know." "I know," Chloe said quietly. "It should be." The camera crew moved around, capturing shots of the staff, the customers, the soup steaming in wide bowls. When they finally panned toward the kitchen, the lens caught me. Standing behind the counter, stirring another pot, watching my daughter with a warmth that only comes from hard-earned forgiveness. I wasn't giving orders anymore. Just cooking, watching, letting her lead. As Chloe served the first bowl of Comfort Revival soup, the room filled with the familiar scent of thyme and slow-simmered love. People took their first spoonfuls and closed their eyes, the kind of reaction that makes years of struggle worth it. One of the servers leaned in and whispered, "They're loving it." I smiled. Of course they are. It's made from the right ingredients. Outside, someone recorded the scene and posted it online. Within hours, the clip spread across social media. The comments poured in. "This is what real legacy tastes like. You can taste the forgiveness. Mother and daughter redemption arc, Michelin-worthy." That night, after closing, Chloe and I sat together at the counter. The lights were dim, the kitchen finally quiet. She poured us each a small bowl of the soup, her soup, and said, "I think Dad would have liked this." I nodded. He'd say you finally learned to let the flame do the work. Chloe smiled. "And you'd say, what?" I looked at her, my heart full. "I'd say the recipe finally came out right." We sat there in silence, sharing the meal, the warmth, the peace. No speeches, no reporters, Just a mother and daughter eating the proof that love, when slow-cooked long enough, becomes forgiveness. A year after Comfort Revival Soup made headlines, Rhodes Table wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a movement. Jonas said it best one afternoon over coffee. "You didn't just rebuild a business," he told me. "You rebuilt an idea." That idea became the Rhodes Legacy School. We opened it in the old warehouse 2 blocks from the restaurant. Nothing fancy. White walls, open kitchen, secondhand tables, and the smell of bread that never quite left the air. The sign outside was simple. Rhodes Legacy School, cooking with heart, serving with dignity. Our first students were 10 women. All immigrants, all starting over. Some had fled bad marriages, others had come chasing hope. Most of them didn't speak much English, but they all understood the language of food. Jonas handled the legal side, Ruth ran the kitchen classes, and I oversaw the curriculum. Chloe volunteered to teach something I never could: hospitality ethics. On opening day, she stood at the front of the classroom, looking both nervous and proud. Her first slide showed a single sentence: "Success without empathy is failure in disguise." The students listened as she told her story, the real one. Not the viral, media-polished version, but the raw truth about greed, arrogance, and the grace of getting a second chance. "I thought business was about winning," she said, her voice steady, "but my mother taught me that the only thing worth winning is trust. Lose that, and you lose everything." The women nodded. Some wiped their eyes. They understood. Meanwhile, Ruth's kitchen classes filled the building with life. She taught them how to hold a knife, how to taste before seasoning, how to let sauce thicken naturally instead of rushing it. One of the students, a young woman named Maria, stayed late after class one day. She was small, quiet, with dark hair tied in a messy bun. She approached me shyly. "Mrs. Rhodes?" she asked. "I'm Maria. I came here from Mexico last year." I smiled. "Welcome, Maria. How are you finding the lessons?" She hesitated, then said softly, "I want to learn how to cook like you, not just food. Memories. I want to cook memories." For a moment I couldn't speak. I saw a younger version of myself in her. Scared, stubborn, but burning with purpose. I put my hand on her shoulder. "Then you're already halfway there," I said, "because cooking memories starts with remembering who you are." That night, after the students left, I walked through the empty classroom. The smell of bread lingered mixed with soap and laughter. On the chalkboard, someone had written in uneven handwriting, "Food is love you can taste." Ruth came in, wiping her hands on a towel. "You see this, Evelyn?" she said. "We're building more than cooks. We're building souls." Jonas leaned against the doorframe, holding his ever-present folder. "And I thought I was just filing papers," he joked. I laughed. Even paperwork can build dreams, Jonas. You just have to file the right ones." Later that month, Miles held the premiere for his documentary, The Woman Behind Rhodes Table. He invited everyone, our staff, the students, old customers, even a few journalists who'd once written about the scandal. The small theater downtown was packed. As the lights dimmed, Sam's face filled the screen again, smiling, cooking, living. Then came the years of struggle, of rebuilding, of love rediscovered through food. When the credits rolled, the room stood. No one clapped right away, they just stood there, silent, full of something too heavy for applause. And then, slowly, the sound began. Hands, tears, cheers. Chloe hugged me tightly, whispering, "You did it, Mom." I shook my head. "No, sweetheart, we did." After the premiere, the students crowded around, eyes wide. Maria asked for a photo. "Can I send this to my mother?" she said. "She cooks, too." "Of course," I told her. "Tell her she's part of this story, too." That night, when I finally locked up the school, I stood by the window for a long time. Inside, the classroom lights glowed softly, Ruth's knives neatly stacked, Jonas's papers organized, Chloe's whiteboard still showing her last sentence. "Integrity is flavor you can't fake." Outside, the city hummed, alive and hungry. I looked at the rows of chairs, the empty stoves, the lingering warmth in the air. In that moment, I could see it all, the past, the present, and the future, blending together like ingredients in the same pot. It wasn't just about teaching recipes anymore. It was about passing down what couldn't be written. Patience, honesty, and love that never burns out. And for the first time since Sam's death, I didn't just feel peace. I felt purpose. The sun was setting behind the city, spilling gold through the windows of Rhodes' table. The restaurant had closed for the night. The laughter, the music, the clinking of dishes, all of it had faded into a quiet that felt peaceful, not empty. Evelyn, me, stood at the sink, washing the last pan of the day. The water was warm, the soap gentle on my hands. After all these years, that motion, slow, careful, steady, still felt like prayer. Behind me, the others were cleaning up. Ruth stacked plates, humming softly. Jonas was wiping down tables, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. More friend than lawyer now. And Chloe was at the counter, folding napkins, her hair falling loose over her face. Every so often, she'd glance toward me and smile, the quiet kind of smile that says thank you without words. The air was full of small sounds, the clink of a spoon, the soft creak of chairs, the faint hiss of the stove cooling down. It was the sound of peace, the kind that doesn't announce itself. It just fills the spaces where pain used to live. When the last light of the day hit the wall, it caught the family photo that now hung above the entrance. The one Miles had framed after finishing his documentary. In it, Sam and I stood shoulder to shoulder, young and stubborn and hopeful. Beneath that photo, a brass plaque read, "Founded by Evelyn and Samuel Rhodes, rebuilt by family." Chloe noticed me looking at it. She came over holding 2 cups of tea. She handed me one and said, "You always told me the kitchen teaches everything. I didn't believe you until now." I smiled. "It doesn't teach fast. It just waits for you to listen." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Then I guess I finally heard it." I touched her hand. "You didn't just hear it, sweetheart. You learned it." Ruth switched off the last light in the dining room, leaving only the soft glow above the sink. Jonas stacked the chairs by the wall and said, "For a relic, you've built quite the empire." I laughed. "Jonas, relics don't build empires, they build roots." He grinned. "Same thing if you do it right." We all laughed, the kind of laughter that doesn't come from jokes but from gratitude, the kind that reminds you you've survived something together. Chloe grabbed her bag, Ruth her coat. Jonas turned the open sign to closed. One by one they left, their voices fading into the night. I stayed a moment longer. The water in the sink had gone still, the steam curling softly like breath. I turned off the faucet and leaned on the counter, just listening, to nothing and to everything. That's when I spoke, not out loud, but to whoever might someday hear my story.